Broadcasting around the world, this is On the Record with Christian Briggs. Serious talk about what's happening around the world and how it affects you. Unfiltered truth for a world on edge. Follow us on X at BMC_HAM. Live in 3, 2, 1.
Welcome back, everybody. This is another great show today on the record with Christian Briggs. Today I'm going to be talking about the Central Bank Digital Currency, the empire, how China, BRICS, and the central banks are building a new financial world order. Not just a new world order, a new financial world order. And we know President Trump knows what's going on. We've obviously been working with various members of the administration, of course, of Congress over the last 5 and 6 years to bring awareness how the Federal Reserve usurped the congressional power, the powers that be that make all the laws. And they did this covertly under the Hamilton clandestine project out of the New York Bank building. So we are going to talk all about that today on this program. We're going to pretty much peel back the onion and let you understand the layers and layers of clandestine, willful intent to deceive a first-term president when Trump was in his first term, when the Federal Reserve was building up their entire new monetary reset in conjunction with the CCP. And then we're also going to talk about how fast forward we're trying to stop all of that. So as we kind of move forward here, this is going to be a hell of a show. So stay tuned. We are ready to kind of dive down deep into the belly of the beast, right? The 7 heads of the dragon, as I think China likes to call themselves. Let me tell you where all this kind of comes back to. Okay. Today we're going to discuss what may be one of the most important geopolitical and economic stories that is unfolding anywhere in the world as we speak right this second, okay? And the reason why it's so important is that once they reset your money into a digital form, in other words, they tokenize it, and you go to the bank and you cannot get cash, you cannot physically take anything out. It's all going to be based on permissions, right? Where you're going to make sure that you're within the understanding of the social credit score and that you have a high social credit score in order to be able to just function within society.
That the central bank maintain a stable currency and payment system for the public's benefit. That's one of our jobs. We also live in a time of transformational innovation around digital payments, and we need to make sure that the Fed is able to continue to deliver to the public a stable and trustworthy currency and payment system. We're working proactively to evaluate whether to issue a CBDC, and if so, in what form.
So, as most Americans have never heard about this, we are going to tell you today. The first thing you need to know is about 5 years ago when I had discovered the Federal Reserve had gone far further deeper and had well more organized the building out of a centralized form of crypto. It's not crypto by definition when you say decentralized like Bitcoin, but it's still a crypto, being that it's a digital form of payment known as otherwise as a token of value. And I brought that to the awareness of members of Congress, both in the Senate and the House.
Turning to a topic that's been a subject here for nearly 4 years, Central Bank Digital Currencies, Article 1 of the Constitution reserves coins and coin issuance, money issuance to the Congress. And we've in turn delegated that to the U.S. Treasury, which has, since 1912, engaged the Federal Reserve as their fiscal agent. You've testified here many times before that to issue a central bank digital currency, that would have to be authorized by statute by Congress. Is that still your testimony?
So that is absolutely the case as it relates to a retail CBDC. There are potential forms of a wholesale CBDC that we need to look at.
They had not been anywhere near understanding the complexity until I broke it all up, and I was able to at least format the understanding how the Federal Reserve had contracted with Ripple. Ripple was going to be the world's, it still is, as far as today goes, the backbone to centralization of a monetary platform. In other words, it's how you buy and sell goods, and you have to have that, it's like a highway, if you will, and your little token, which represents a store of value, goes from A to B. The seller to the buyer to the seller, goes back and forth on this little intricate peer-to-peer highway. This highway is all centralized, which means it's a closed environment. It's not like cryptocurrency, which is an open platform. It's an open society, what they call decentralized. So No real individual or a handful of individuals has the right or has the capabilities to be able to stop your money from moving from A to B. They just don't have that. What they have is they have under the centralized system, okay, a way to nefariously, through bad acting, because these are bad actors. We all know this. The Great Reset is real. The New World Order is alive and well. You're going to have nothing and be miserable. They have the ability to stop the flow of money. They can turn off your wallet. Your wallet will be inside your phone. And hell, everything else is already in the phone now. You want to go travel? Boom. You want to buy something? Boom. You want healthcare? Boom. You want to show a police officer your ID, your insurance, your registration? Boom. It's on the phone. Everything is on that unique serial number that identifies you. That's your phone. John said it 2,000 years ago, wrote it on paper. That is where we are today.
Everywhere she goes, Ouyang Haoyu is followed. What she buys, how she behaves, is tracked and scored to show how responsible and trustworthy she is. It's called the social credit system, and in one version now being tested, a person's reputation is scored on a scale of 350 to 950. Citizens are required to do hours of unpaid work to get benefits, and scores are docked for things like littering, a messy yard, gossip, even jaywalking.
So as we move forward and we understand the silent financial revolution, okay? The financial revolution is upon us, but it's silent. 99% of people have no clue that what Bitcoin and all of those private cryptos on decentralized systems were all about was to condition us to be able to use a measure of value, a digital algorithm with little code that creates the algorithm, and it creates the actual non-physical but yet existing framework of something that you find has value. And you would trade that value. You would give up cash, gold, silver, anything of value, rare cars, rare coins, rare art. They would take all of those things away, and you would then be programmed to allow yourself to believe that the unbelievable is believable, and that something that doesn't exist, that has no real value, nothing that's concrete, but they're creating it. They're getting you conditioned and programmed to believe that this little tiny piece of digital code has greater value than a bar of gold or a stack of cash. Here we are today. Where are we today? Well, most investors, most individuals have never fully understand what centralized digital money is. Most politicians barely even talk about it, because when they do, nobody understands it. And the ones that do always say, well, why aren't you stopping it? Why are we having all this? Why did the Federal Reserve have the ability to go out and do this? But the decisions are not being made in Congress. They're not being made at the White House. Those decisions are being made by people far higher, far more connected, and that are not elected, not even appointed, but already established through generational endeavors, generational inheritance, generational understanding of families who control governments, societies, cultures, banks, central banks. Those decisions will be made by the central banks, the finance ministers, sovereign wealth funds, international organizations that are fundamentally reshaping the global financial system over the next 3 to 5 years. Oh, if you think I'm kidding, tell you what, go look online and put European Union moves forward with e-euro 2027, 28, 29. They're moving forward with the Central Bank Digital Currency, better known as the e-euro. And for nearly 80 years, the United States dollar has occupied a position unlike any currency in human history. This is a fact. However, this e-euro is going to try to leapfrog over us. The digital yuan out of China leapfrog over us. See, since the end of World War II, the dollar has served as the backbone of global commerce. This is what President Trump is desperately trying to maneuver us back into. And he's doing a fabulous job by utilizing oil sales, by utilizing tariffs, and utilizing other forms of negotiating powers that he has, and the tools of which are at his fingertips. But he's realizing, like anybody else does, this isn't a one-day deal. This isn't going to be able to be pushed into a corner where everyone's going to say uncle or tap out and say you win. These people are nefarious. They have gotten together to try to destroy the United States through an economic warfare of limiting the dollar in usage.
Is the United States dollar under threat? Well, the U.S. dollar became the backbone of the global economy after World War II because of America's robust economy, its democracy, and its transparent regulatory systems, which made the nation seem like a safe place for international investors. But now the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, have announced plans to develop a new currency.
By thus limiting the dollar in demand, and thus by going down, being the dollar, in value, and that would hurt our economy. Any nation that ever finds itself in a complexity of a financial war knows that their currency is the backbone to the success or failure, whether it is South America, whether it's in Europe or Asia, or whether it's right here in the United States. Our value resides on the credibility, the understanding, and the way of which people perceive the value of our currency than they perceive the value of our debt. If they think the dollar is going to go down, then they look at the dollar debt, because it's all based on dollar-based instruments, our bonds, our treasuries, our debt, and then they sour on that. Higher interest rates means higher inflation, which means lower dollar value, which means lower bond values. Very much what we're experiencing right now, and that's why President Trump is fighting so hard to reverse those policies, which the Biden administration had some of the worst people around them because they were all communists. They hated the United States. Obama, 2 terms, did everything he could to destroy the bedrock, the fabric, the Constitution that is perfect in the way it was made for everybody, but he didn't like it because it was too much in a conservative manner. But you got to have it that way. Not conservative by necessarily socially, but conservatively in fiscal, accountability, limitations on federal power, and all the power. And at the end of the day, the majority of the power, I say all the power that had any value, was in the hands of the people. Small amount of power to the people, all the large amount of power to the government. And the government needs to be a behemoth, so that way you can never push it back out. Trump's trying to take all of that, and he is reversing it. He's got great people at Treasury that are doing really good stuff, great people in the Senate and the House that are supporting him tremendously. But he's realizing, like I said earlier, it's not easy. When you got half the world against you, a third of the world doesn't know what the hell you're talking about, and the other third is, yeah, sure, we'll kind of work with you a little bit as long as we can. You're really fighting a battle where you're pushing up a rock with a wet noodle. Like, it can be done, but it's a struggle. And so when we come back out of World War II, just to kind of show you a little bit, follow along here, me mentally trying to draw this picture here. After World War II, we were the backbone of all commerce. Nations were settling all trade in dollars. Commodities were priced in dollars. Energy was priced in dollars. And here's the best part. Sovereign nations, countries, governments, their largest reserves of cash, which is kind of like an asset to, like a saving for a rainy day or savings account, were all trading in dollars, of course. Well, they were held in dollars. International debt was issued in dollars. The dollar became more than a currency. It became the operating system of the global economy. That's what it was. We were the first. We were the ultimate country that had the very best to offer. The position that gave the United States extraordinary advantages was that everybody believed that the dollar was the ultimate asset to have and to trade in. It allowed Washington to borrow at lower costs, which almost any nation on earth would love to do. We were number one. It provided the ability to impose sanctions that could cripple economies thousands of miles away. It gave American policymakers influence over global capital flows, trade relationships, and number one, financial infrastructure. Think about that. The dollar became not just a monetary tool, but an instrument of national power for national security reasons, and thus created a sound financial system that everybody could count on, not just here in the United States, but all over the world. They came to realize the United States was the most sound financial system on earth. And history teaches us that no financial system has remained dominant forever. No financial system can remain dominant because a lot of times corruption, like Joe Biden, who said that, Obama, corruption, who said that. All of those people tried to hurt us in a way of which they by this guy, okay, he allowed all of these people to send trillions and trillions of dollars out, going God knows where, to God knows who, for God knows what, and there's no payback. And that's why we have this massive increase in debt while he was president. And so when you look at this, when the British pound once occupied a similar position, okay, remember that. And then in 92, they got hammered. The pound almost pretty much got destroyed. Before that, it was the Dutch guilder. Before that, it was Spanish silver. So when you look at every dominant monetary system, it eventually encounters competitors, challengers, and alternatives. That's where we're at. So competitors, digital yuan. We've got the pound, the euro. We've got challengers. China aggressively challenging us in both petro sales, trade commodities, long-term trade deals, and localized transactions in local currencies, not just the regular or the digital yuan, which is obviously the next generation, which will be the final generation of currency or the way of payments go. Sometimes these alternatives fail, and many times they more succeed than fail, actually, because a society that goes over 200 to 250 years will have become a record in terms of being intact and holding it together. And so we're kind of at that pivotal point. So what matters is not whether the transition happens overnight, but matters is whether infrastructure is being built to maintain what we have so it doesn't happen overnight where we don't succeed, where we fall off the cliff into the perils of the abyss. And who knows what happens other than we're going to have massive inflation. We're going to have cost of living skyrocket. We're going to have wealth destruction if it's based in your currency. And that's precisely what we're seeing today, is that exact thing. Look at real estate. Real estate does not go up. Gold does not go up. Hard assets do not go up. Cost of living in general does not go up without government participation, because they're the ones who create it through inflation by overprinting, because they need extra money to be able to maintain the same budgets of spending or the same buying power of spending. So they increase the amount of cash to maintain the current, or in some cases, it has to increase the buying power of the currency. So when something costs $10,000 1 year, 2 years later it costs $20,000, they've got to now print $20,000 to achieve the same buying power as what was just a couple, 3 years earlier. That's how it works. So over the past several years, a growing coalition of countries has begun constructive alternative financial architecture. And here's the best part. Our own Federal Reserve did this. That's why Trump was hammering Powell. He knew that you can't spend $3.4 billion on a remodel. I did a remodel once. It was $111,000, and that was a lot of part of the house. $3.5 billion, where $1.5 billion is overrun. Let's go back a second. I'm gonna talk about that. What is it about that little building in Washington, D.C. that cost $3.5 billion? Now, I know that they must have ordered 50 tons of gold, 5,000 tons of marble, 7,000 Rolls Royces for all their constituents. I mean, it had to be, because there's no conceivable way on a per square foot basis, unless they were doing, some of that money might have been for servers, heck, who knows, might have been for technology infrastructure, developers, integration on monetary platforms outside the United States, as well as the CCIP, alternative to the SWIFT. Maybe they were using that extra money and Trump got wind of it, but not for the actual remodel, but the beginning of the centralized currency that they were going to centralize under their authority, and they were going to be the masters of the universe, directly tied in to other governments, including the Bank of International Settlements, the BIS. Look that up. They're nothing but bad people that all they want is a system that will absolutely, positively centralize all wealth. And when I say you're going to have nothing, there's no joke about that. That is 100% their game. The rules are being made up years ago, and the rules are then changing as we change to be able to make sure that they can the consistency of their plan continues to move forward. So again, I go back to the same thing. Over the past several years, a growing group of countries has begun the ultimate alternative financial architecture for the Great Reset. And we're not talking theatrical alternatives, not even academic discussions can fully understand this because it's so big. It's actual operational systems designed to reduce the reliance on the US dollar and the institutions that support it. Russia and China have dramatically reduced dollar usage by bilateral trade within their trade agreements. India has expanded local currency settlement mechanisms, and Trump is using tariffs as a bargaining chip. He's saying, look, you cannot do that. He also took over Venezuela to stop the Chinese for buying all their oil in yuan, as well as a discounted rate to help their economy keep down and lower all of the inflationary pressures that an economy will have or society will have if they have high oil prices. So Venezuela is selling it at a bargain basement discount. A is on sale, blue light special. If you remember Kmart, anybody out there over 50. So BRICS has expanded its membership and deepened both membership and partnerships. And they've deepened discussions surrounding alternative settlement frameworks.
In 2024, the bloc's membership doubled as its founding members, Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa, were joined by Egypt, Iran, the United Arab Emirates and Ethiopia. All have one thing in common: they're not part of the Western world, although many maintain close trade ties there. President Vladimir Putin says BRICS member countries.
The total GDP of the BRICS Association is more than $60 trillion.
So here's what it is. China has continued building the cross-border interbank payment system known as CIPS. I call it CCIP because it's communist. I call it the communist cross-border interbank payment system. While multiple nations explore central bank digital currencies capable of facilitating direct settlement outside traditional correspondent banking channels. What does that mean? I'm glad you asked. What that means is we're going to see central banks around the world, as in the EU and the United States and China, Southeast Asia, several countries in both South America, Latin America, Africa, moving toward a centralized system that interconnects. What do you think all these AI data centers are for? I mean, you didn't really think they were just for increasing efficiency and lowering cost of productivity in companies. No, there's a ton of government stuff going on. Of the thousands and thousands of data centers that are going to be built over the next 5 or 10 years, they're all going to be interconnected like the Terminator, right? Skynet. For anybody who hasn't seen the Terminator 1, 2, or 3, I highly recommend it. They were ahead of their time when they showed us what was coming. Robotics, both military and private ways of which to replace people. Number 2 will be artificial intelligence, which is software that replicates itself in both intelligence, wisdom, and I call it wisdom and understanding because it's wise enough to know that if it understands more than us, it can get rid of us, which it's tried to do now with Google having a little issue with something, and I won't say exactly what it is. And of course, the banking system had a problem about 6 to 8 weeks ago that I won't say it. Let's just say AI was definitely a problem in the banks as well as some other areas. and they're expanding all this. They're expanding it. So I'm going to make it clear again. What we're talking about are multiple nations are exploring, and they're already building, they're already piloting, testing, deployment is imminent for many of them. Some have already deployed it. Central bank digital currencies that are capable of facilitating direct settlement outside traditional corresponding banking channels, which means those central banks will then determine whether you are worthy enough to buy something. Many of the headlines exaggerate a lot of the way CBDC works. They say, oh, it's okay. They exaggerate the benefit, the bonus, the wonderfulness, the efficiency of it. Safer, hat-proof, all this stuff. That's what government does. Listen, it's going to be more efficient. It's a lot safer. And you're going to love it. And it's like, oh, man, that sounds good. Oh, yeah, okay, let's go for it. Oh, 1913. Oh, you mean the IRS gets formed, the Treasury and the IRS tax rates. Oh, it's only going to affect the top 10% of America forever at 1 to 5% or 3% or 4%. Oh, hey, that's perfect. I'm a blue-collar worker. I will never have to worry about those doggone taxes. Yeah, how'd that work out? Now, when they exaggerate the benefits of a CBDC, They exaggerate a lot, but they really are just lying to you. The only benefit is one centralized group of people, and it could be 5 people for all that matter with AI. And so the dollar does remain dominant as far as the number one singled out currency for transaction, but the usage has gone from 90% to less than 50%. Okay. Now, some weeks and some months, it might be 50%. A lot of times it's 48%. It remains the most liquid and trusted currency in the world, but that is changing. In fact, we're witnessing what may be more significant than a sudden collapse. Then we could see it. See, if you fall off a cliff, you're going to be like, ooh, that's a long ways down. But if you're taking one step at a time to get down there, it's less likely that you notice the depths or the speed or the height of which you're going down at a slow rate, but you're still going down. So what we're really witnessing is the gradual construction of optionality. Countries that once had no choice but to transact through dollar channels are increasingly creating backup systems. They are building dollar alternatives. Dollar SWIFT, which is the U.S. Way in which we send and receive money, they've already built alternatives, like I've said before. They're reducing vulnerabilities on the dollar. They don't want to be vulnerable anymore. They don't want our dollar because it lacks what is the credibility. They lack the underlying understanding of the foundation. Okay? That's a big deal. That's no joke. And what happens if access to the dollar system becomes political risky and they get sanctioned? They don't want to be sanctioned. They don't want to be sanctioned and cut off the dollar because then it hurts them. They've learned. They've been burned for 25, 30, 35 years. Russia did it with the Ukrainian war. Biden goes, oh, we're going to cut you off.
Moving to the war in Ukraine now and a potential new source of funding for Kyiv's defense effort. The United States is reportedly looking into the possibility of seizing some $300 billion in frozen Russian assets.
Putin goes, of what? The dollar. You've been cutting this off for 25 years. We've already built different ways of which to transact. Well, don't tell me that. I mean, it was like back and forth. Like, it was like some guy trying to tell somebody else, hey, I don't like you. You can't use and play with my toys anymore. And the other guy goes, I never liked you. I never played with your toys, so you can keep them. You goofball. I'm sure there were other words, but similar story, right. We're going to be right back. When we come back, the question intensified after the freezing of Russian reserves in 22, as I started. Hope I got your appetite wet because it's going to get a lot better in the second half. We'll be right back.
On the Record with Christian Briggs will be right back after a word from our sponsor. Gold has more than tripled since September 2022, rising from $1,656 per ounce to over $5,000 by February 2026. That's a 205% gain, outperforming the market, and proving why gold is the ultimate long-term hedge. As global debt soars and currencies weaken, central banks are hoarding gold at record pace. Why aren't you? Call 844-426-4653 or visit bmcham.com. Protect your future with real assets. Own gold now.
All right, welcome back. Here we go. Whether one agrees with the policy or not, whether you agree with me, whether you agree with the way things are going to go, John wrote it 2,000 years ago. He hasn't been wrong yet. The event of 22, where Biden put massive sanctions, freezing the reserves, which is, cash and gold or any of the assets of Russia, which I think was about $300 billion. That sound about right, Chris?
South $300 billion?
Yeah, $300 billion sounds about right. We have an expert here in the room. Prudent expert. That's right. Okay, yeah. Whatever the number, 2 kilometer billion, it got frozen. So whether one agrees with that policy or not, the event sent a message around the world. I remember the day it happened too. February of 22, when they invaded Ukraine. Within days or a few weeks, they had started sanctioning, they started freezing. Maybe it took a few more months for the UN resolution, all those kind of things that kind of come back to the full circle. But they did it. And central bank reserves that were held in foreign jurisdictions were all frozen because they all had the vote. I think it was the UN that eventually voted it all in and said, "Yep, let's do it." So a payment access was severely restricted completely. I mean, there might have been some loopholes, but here's the kicker. Putin did not lose 1 minute of sleep. He didn't lose $1 financially. He knew it was coming. Financial infrastructure now could become geopolitical infrastructure, where many governments have, will, and continue to utilize power against other countries, the dollar currency, transactable, shareable, all the things of which money has to do things, right? It has to go from A to B. You got to share it here, give it there, receive it here. They cut everything off. So what we saw was very simple. A result had been a surge in gold accumulation, increased interest in local currency settlement and exploration of CBDCs, and the expansion of alternative payment rails. That's what happened when we sanctioned Ukraine and Russia. Okay, because obviously we sent money to Ukraine, but we told them don't spend it in a bad way. Well, they kind of did. So we tried to limit their bad ways of which to spend it, but it didn't work. We tried to completely limit any use of dollars in Russia. So we tried to put a few guardrails around Ukraine and said, don't do this. We're sending you 200, 300 billion around all the countries around the world, including the U.S. pretty much sent about 90% of that. Saying, listen, we're going to restrict you. It's got to be used for the war effort. And I think I heard about 50% went into some bank accounts of the executives. We'll call it the executives of the country. And like, what did Zelensky go? I never saw all that money. I saw like half of it. So the rails didn't work. And then we cut off Putin, froze his money, froze access to the world's dollar exchange, as we call it. So many governments began reassessing their exposure to dollar-based assets. The result has been a surge in gold accumulation, as I say very clearly. Central banks purchased gold at historically elevated levels over recent years, but this was nothing. When they saw their reserve currency values drop like a rock with the dollar or other paper-based currencies, they got extremely nervous. Central banks started dumping bonds, but mostly the United States, but other countries, and they began to reassess their exposure and started buying precious metals, gold and silver, gold parts, of course. And so what makes this moment particularly important is that multiple trends were converging simultaneously. We have dollarization discussions where they were going to, and they still are, nothing's changed. Trump's been able to get more settlements with oil and commodities in dollar, but it's not aggressive enough to where it's reversed 50 years worth of, just horrible policy. So when you had dollarization, which is the declining dollar pressure, people that are countries that are actively saying, look, you're going to sanction us one day. We even just hiccup, sneeze, trip, say the wrong thing, you're going to sanction us. We are no longer going to be held hostage to something that we may do that really wasn't politically incorrect, or you just got emotionally stupid. So now we have CBD development, Central Bank Digital Currencies, and that's what happened. So this communist monetary platform, exceedingly communist. It's exceedingly evil. It's the stripping of all wealth gets developed. Go look. Go look at CBDC progress around the world. There's plenty of websites that are following the development, deployment, and integration of this. We have the risk now of all things tokenized. In fact, it's not even a risk. It's going to happen. Citibank made it clear this last week. Everything, all your stocks, your bonds, your real estate, your car titles, boat titles, plane titles, 401s, IRAs, everything, with the exception of a few things in the hard asset business. Look at rare watches, by the way. They've gone up 20-fold in the last 20 years, especially those Pateks. Those things you can't. They're physical. You put them on your body or you have them. But anything else that's paper-based, they are tokenized. Look it up. Citibank, Bank of America, BlackRock, Blackstone. Look it up, people. They're tokenizing your assets.
I would say the biggest question from central banks is, what is the role of tokenization and digitization? How quickly should they think about digitizing their own currency? What does that mean for the role of the dollar? If every currency digitizes and we have what does that mean for bank payments? What does that mean for the payment companies like MasterCard and Visa? All these are being questioned right now. I think we spend so much time talking about AI. We're not spending enough time talking about how quickly we're going to tokenize every financial asset.
Once they tokenize it, that goes from a paper to a digital. They got the encryption keys. You can't move it without begging or pleading. And we have AI infrastructure transformation for both transportation through digital ID, also tickets, transformation in finance. We have it for healthcare. We have it for everything now, including our paper currency goes to digital. That means our money, our wealth is now digitalized, and there's somebody out there that has the lever, the button that has to be pushed before you and I have access to it. How's that? We have geopolitical fragmentation being built right in front of our eyes. We have a growing competition between competitive visions of the future and the monetary system, and thus we're going to be on. And unfortunately, those growing competitors are all nefarious. We have one guy trying to hold this all together and push back, and that's President Trump. He's got some good people around him, and he's got some people that, think they were out to lunch when they were handing out, the 200 IQs. They're smart, but they lack the vision sometimes. No disrespect. But unless you can see around corners, he can. He knows how to do that. He's got a few people that can do it. You got to get people in there that have built this, that understand it, but they understand who the bad actors are. Because one vision says the dollar-centered order continues. Let me explain to you what that means. One vision says the dollar-centered order continues, perhaps modernized through stable coins, digital payments, and upgraded settlement systems, okay? That's one vision. Another vision imagines a more fragmented world where multiple currencies, CBDCs, regional blocks, and digital settlement platforms coexist. Let me tell you something. If we centralize any part of our money, you centralize any part, it automatically defaults to our assets, all assets, are tokenized, centralized, and you will not have access to them without permission. When you wake up one morning, you see today that you can physically grab, physically touch, put it all together in your hand. You will not be able to have that. So let's talk about this. Project mBridge, BRICS, and the new architecture of global settlement. See, this is important, okay? Now we're getting into the really, really deep weeds, okay? Now that we've established the battle over the future of money is not some distant event. Remember, January 1st of 29, the United States Congress is trying to put together a bill to ban CBDC until that day. Right now it's banned until 31. Then it got moved up to 30. Now they want it to be deployed in 29. Same exact time that they go full circle in Europe. They start the testing in 27, just next year, the beta testing. Then in 28, they really push it out. And then 29, it's done. You're cashless. That means everybody makes the 2030 agenda. Okay? So again, as we established that there is a battle over the future of our money, our way of life, our privacy, our freedom, our decentralized current monetary system. Now, why do we need to change it? Well, because they can't control it. It's not a distant event. It's here. It's happening. It's already got countries that have launched this. We're 98% integrated around the world in architecture. Now all we got to do is plug us all in with these data centers. So we need to talk about one of the least understood and potentially most important financial projects in the world. And again, most Americans never heard of this. Okay? But let's call it. It's called Project mBridge. M for Mary Bridge. On the surface, mBridge sounds kind of boring. When I first heard about it, I knew instantly, I saw a white paper on it. I knew instantly this thing is nefarious all the way around. It's bad. It sounds like a technology project that only bankers and software engineers would care about. But underneath, the technical language lies something much worse, much bigger. mBridge is an attempt to answer a question that many countries around the world have been asking themselves for years. Can international trade occur faster, cheaper, and more efficient, or efficiently, I would say probably, because they don't want, without relying on traditional dollar-based financial systems that have dominated global commerce for generations called a SWIFT? And of course, the answer is yes, and that's why it's relevant. So now you've got mBridge, you got, I call it CCIP. That is where mBridge enters the story. Okay? The system evolved over decades to become the backbone of global commerce. But it was built for a different era. It was built long before distributed ledger technology, digital currencies, artificial intelligence, and instant digital communication transformed every other aspect of the economy. That is where mBridge enters the story. It was originally developed through cooperation between guess who? Get ready. Chris, you ready for this?
Yeah.
He's ready for this. The People's Bank of China, the Hong Kong Monetary Authority, now run by the People's Republic of China, and the Bank of Thailand and the Central Bank of the United Arab Emirates. The projects opt to create a wholesale central bank digital currency platform capable of facilitating direct cross-border settlement between participating central banks. And guess who later joined? Saudi Arabia later joined the initiative, while numerous other central banks and international organizations are now monitoring and co-developing inside the platform. Go figure. The object was not to create a consumer-facing digital currency for everyday purchases. No. This was not about replacing cash in people's wallets. This was about creating a digital framework of infrastructure that would allow, I'm going to say this slow, participating financial institutions, central banks, to settle large-scale international transactions directly. Remember that, centralized. Almost instantaneously without the delays and complexities that characterize much of today's international banking system. And it was on the blockchain on a centralized ledger, not a decentralized digital distributed ledger. And for many people that don't know what that means, basically, you're SOL. If it's centralized, you're SOL. And if you don't know what SOL stands for, please look it up. The implications of that capability extend far beyond efficiency. If a transaction that once required 3 or 4 days can be settled in seconds, this creates enormous economic advantages. Great. The capital becomes more productive, liquidity becomes more accessible, businesses face less uncertainty, financial institutions reduce operational costs. Those benefits alone would be enough to justify significant interest from governments and central banks. Boom! But that efficiency is only part of the story. See, here's the second part. The second part of the story is what happens when settlement no longer requires the same infrastructure that has traditionally been associated with dollar-based transactions. This is where discussions about de-dollarizations, CBDCs, and financial sovereignty began to intersect. This paper I reviewed, it was published in early this year, examining the geopolitical implications of mBridge, and it was described, I remember this, that the project has a multi-central bank digital currency platform, and it was capable of facilitating settlement in local currencies while potentially reducing dependence on dollar intermediation over time. I remember reading that as bad. What that basically says is we've got a whole new mousetrap, we've got a whole new plan, we've got a whole new way of transacting, and guess what? You guys are left out. Good luck with your currency when nobody wants to use it. That wording is important because many commentators immediately leap from the existence of alternative infrastructure to the conclusion that the dollar is about to disappear, and they're not wrong. When I first realized the Federal Reserve under Project Hamilton, a clandestine plan was being built, and I brought that to attention of several U.S. senators and several House members, which of course I still keep in daily contact with, was just on up there last week, and was in D.C. with several meetings over exactly this, working on a whole new white paper, which will hopefully the White House will look at this one in the same light they looked at my prior ones, and understood exactly there's also some new ways of which we need to pivot around this, because I'm going to tell you something right here, right now. This is not what the people want. They do not want a group of men and women, it could be anybody, right?
True.
Centralizing all their money, all
How
their wealth.
progressive of you.
What's that?
How progressive of you.
Well, I'm trying to do my best. You never know. I mean, look at the woman that runs the EU, Christopher. What is her, Ben Winkle? I don't even know what the hell her name is. Remember, she's that blonde chick. She's Dutch. I think she's Dutch. Hold on a second. We're going to look her up. It is Ursula von der Leyen. See, I told you I wasn't that far off.
Close.
Von der Leyen. Ursula. Oh, man, she's woohoo. Listen, Stalin and Lenin would be jealous of this woman's communist views on humanity. Fiscal and social policy is like, oh, we'll just live in a meta world. You don't need to leave your house. That's what meta vision is all about, meta universe. Don't worry about, we'll give you universal basic income. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, bull. Okay, sounds good. The distinction. Let me tell you something here real quick. We're gonna get down to some nitty-gritty here on this thing. We still got some time. This distinction about what mBridge represents and the immediate transformation as an alternative system in which to bypass any and all use or framework of the dollar should give everybody the existence of fear. It's fear, because let me tell you something. These people are scaring us into safety, convenience, efficiency, right, Chris? And the government always tells you, oh, cyber attack. They could take your money. They could break into your house. Digital currency. They can't touch it. We'll hold it for you.
It's secure.
It's the cure.
Right.
Believe-
Secure. But yeah.
Well, they call it secure, but
It's not.
they call it the
Right.
cure to the virus. We don't have a virus. Remember COVID? How'd that flu work out? This distinction between replacement and optionality may be the single most important concept for understanding what is happening today. Countries are not necessarily abandoning the dollar. No, they're not abandoning it. Instead, they are reducing the risk associated with dependence on a single system because China has shown them, no, don't use the dollar. Look at what happens to gold. It's going up. Buy gold. Dump the dollar. Use the yuan. It's stable. So when you think about the significance of mBridge, it becomes more apparent when viewed through the lens of BRICS expansion. It is a nefarious platform to do monumental harm to the United States national security policy of its currency, which is the bedrock, the platform, and the backbone of any society. And for years, BRICS was often dismissed as a loose collection of emerging economies with limited cohesion. Critics pointed out the political differences between member states, the lack of unified institutions, and the absence of a common currency as a way of ways to dismiss the BRICS. I built overviews and presentations and white papers on the BRICS for years, sending it to Congress during the Biden administration, showing how the Biden was purposely looking the other way to give China a continuation of stronger foothold in both natural resources, rare earth elements, and financial strength through aggressive expansion during his administration. How they were buying gold, using it as a backstop to increase the value proposition of the digital yuan and the regular yuan, the RMB, as a means of which to transact and to bypass the dollar into local currencies. And I got thousands of thanks for that. Many people called me from Congress saying, you helped put something together that had not been understood to be able to bring President Trump to sign that executive order on January 29th of 2025.
A government-issued CBDC is nothing more than an Orwellian surveillance tool that will be used to erode the American way of life. The federal government has no business monitoring Americans' daily financial lives. We don't need or want a state-run digital dollar with Chinese Communist Party characteristics. We need to protect the core principles that make this country exceptional: liberty, limited government, and the right to privacy. We cannot jeopardize who we are as Americans, and this bill is designed to ensure just that.
This is when he signed that big executive order, which stopped the CBDC from moving forward, even though it is moving forward. It has moved forward through FedNow. And BRICS was often dismissed. I kept saying, do not dismiss the power of China's influence in both trade agreements, long-term cooperation agreements, and financial systems, and the CCIPS rails that are being built. Do not. And critics pointed out, and some of them laughed. I had people laugh at me, but guess what? 2 years from now, no one's going to be laughing when this stuff starts to become not just the reality, but the utilization of everyday way in which to pay for stuff. Watch what happens to the things you can't tokenize, those assets. So those criticisms were not right. Yet something important has happened over the last several years, and that has the BRICS organization has expanded dramatically. Trump is trying to minimize that expansion continuation moving forward, dismantle it where he can, reposition dollars as the vital and the most utilized currency in daily transactions, and bring it back to the world's #1 reserve asset, because right now that's gold, euros, and probably silver at this point. So energy producers became more involved as a means of which for President Trump to do the plan to bring the dollar back to where it needs to be. What once appeared to be a political forum of gradually becoming developed elements of economic structure, and infrastructure and cohesive coalition became a reality. It's a reality now. The expansion of BRICS matters because it increases the political network effects associated with alternative settlement systems. The more BRICS becomes stronger, the more the dollar will lose value, the higher our interest rates go, and the less people will want to have our debt, and they'll continue to sell it and sell it and sell it and sell it. The payment network connecting countries has significantly more value right now with the BRICS and with the CCIPS. They are building this and they're expanding it, and they're doing it right now faster than any time in history, but we're trying to slow that down, okay? And so think about this, and I'm going to have a part 2 on this on my next show. You're going to love it. So at the time, what makes this story particularly fascinating is that it no longer is confined to just China, Russia, or BRICS. So similar conversions off our SWIFT, which is our dollar-based rails, are occurring throughout the developed world. China has aggressively, and Europe has aggressively pursued, pushed, integrated the digital Euro CBDC initiatives that launches in beta next year. The European Central Bank has openly discussed the need for greater payment sovereignty, and they are dramatically and effectively and quickly reducing dependence on foreign payment providers, the dollar. European policymakers can increasingly view payment infrastructure as a matter of strategic anonymity and autonomy and not merely economic efficiency. They want to centralize everything over there so they can control their citizens in an extreme communist manner.
Now we have in Europe this threshold. Above 1,000 euros, you cannot pay cash. If you do, you are on the gray market. You take your risk. You get caught, you are fined, or you go in jail. But you know, the digital euro is going to have a limited amount of control. There will be control, you're right.
Take their money, take their assets, take their stocks, their bonds, everything that you can put into a digital format, tokenize it, and control it. That's their goal. Officials have specifically pointed to concerns regarding people that have wealth and people that have that wealth in hard assets. Oh yeah, they don't like it. The European Union does not like anybody who has, let's say, rare watch, rare car, rare coin, rare this, rare that, because it's mobile, it's portable, it's private, it always will have increasing value over time, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, all that stuff's long term. The language being used in Europe may differ from the language being used in Beijing, but the underlying understanding is exactly the same. It's exactly the same. Governments around the world are asking who will control the payment rails of the future. The European Union and the BRICS nations, which is led by China, which there's 21 of them, China, India, Russia, Brazil, South Africa, and European Union, both the West and the East. I mean, they're all communists in the majority of the way they think. They're all together in this boat. They're rowing in the same direction. Bottom line is, they do not want the United States to be a part of their plan. They want to take their plan and make it the universal way of which you transact, control the flow of money, control the flow and ownership of assets, exclude the United States so it drops like a 12,000-pound brick at the bottom of the ocean. And so even in 26, the Bank of Japan Deputy Governor Rizoyo Himonio argued that the future monetary system could not be viewed as a simple choice between central bank digital currencies and stablecoins, but instead, he said, the future of financial architecture must involve CBDCs, some stablecoins, mostly tokenized deposits, and blockchain-based settlement mechanisms working together. That's 99.99% communist, centralized. Stablecoins don't have to be a hybrid. They don't have to be a singular decentralized. Stablecoins can be converted into a CBDC just by the very nature of where they go. Everyone says, oh, stablecoins is the way of the future. Not if they're on a centralized system, they're not. I'm Christian Briggs. This is On the Record. I'll be back with part 2 and what to do about this. Now you know the game. Now you know how. Now you know when, where. See it, believe it, look it up. Fact checked us. Please do. But this is for real. This is what was written 2,000 years ago. I am, again, welcoming everybody. We have thousands of new listeners every day. We appreciate you. So we will be back next Wednesday. Thank you so much.